My name is Anita Stewart. I'm the principal of Dubai Schools Al Barsha, and it's my privilege to be alongside such esteemed panelists, very experienced school leaders, to talk about this important topic, blended learning models, how we find the right balance in school education. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and just to open us up to talk about something very briefly, an experience of what blended learning looks like in their educational organizations. So I'm going to hand over to the end here, okay? Ms. Ambika.
Thank you, Anita. I'm Ambika Gulati. I'm the principal of the Millennium School here in Dubai, which is a school that is under the aegis of GEMS Education. So the blended learning, if I can share with you, started many years pre-COVID for us. So it was not because of COVID, but pre-COVID. And that lady in the pink sitting right there is a former colleague of mine. And she and I actually started this whole journey of blended learning at school as an experiment. And I remember Bala coming one day into my office and saying, you know, I have designed this self-paced module and I want the students to do this in their classroom. And this is how I'm going to get differentiation in, and it'll give me more time to work with certain students. And it was all very exciting. And I think it was 2018 or 17 when we looked at it, Bala. And the journey from there has been absolutely phenomenal as far as the school goes in terms of blended learning opportunities. And we all know COVID has only helped accelerate that implementation, that engagement, that embeddedness of blended learning in the school. So we've got several examples in every subject, in every sphere. So it'll be very difficult to share one, but I just thought I'd share the starting journey of blended learning at school with us.
Thank you. And I think that's important that COVID perhaps provided that space for further experimentation, but this has been going on a long time prior. Dr. Benedict, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benedict Ocon, and I'm the school principal of the Philippine School Dubai. My school was founded or established back in 2008, and we are fully implementing the Philippine curriculum. Like what my colleague said here, we've been doing already blended learning since the beginning, but it was actually more organized during the pandemic. So back in 2020, we already purchased a certain LMS that can actually put everything into perspective. Right now, all the teachers are required to create courses and to organize the lessons to be uploaded in our LMS. Now, currently, my school is utilizing 3 main learning management systems, one for all the subjects being offered by the Philippine curriculum, and another one intended for reading, and another one intended for math. So that one is basically the blended learning landscape of my school, the Philippine School Dubai.
Thank you, Dr. Ben. And there we go. Fuad, over to you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Fuad Prince. I'm the head of school at Nassim International School in Bahrain. We see ourselves as an IB world school having PYP, MYP, the diploma program, and the CP. When we talk about blended learning, you know, I'm thinking more than 12, 14 years ago. I was sitting with the director and she told me, Fuad, we want online learning. You know, at that time it was still called online learning. And we've had our eye on technology ever since. And we were lucky enough to be a Google for Education school a couple of years even before COVID. So all our kids from grade 1 right up to grade 12 have Chromebooks. And when COVID came, we were lucky enough to be able just to transition within one day. Over a weekend, everything was in place. So that is where we find ourselves. But the challenge that we always face is working on improving, making sure, and hopefully, and I know definitely throughout the discussion, we will definitely be addressing various issues with regard to blended learning and online learning as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, over to you, Ms. Seema.
Thank you, Ms. Anita. I'm Seema Umar, principal of Dual School. Our school commenced the operation last April, so we are relatively new to this, to Dubai. And talking about blended learning, I remember in 2019 when KHD sent us an email saying that they would prefer a paper-free inspection. Because inspection, during class observations, it's all about worksheets and stuff like that. That's when we moved to online, but we did not know the terminology blended. Thanks to COVID, we all got an understanding about blended. And then what happened here when we started this school, we realized that many students, their reading skills were not up to the expected level. So we were contemplating how are we going to improvise it. That's when we took this approach. We implemented a learning program, an adaptive learning program, which based upon these students' performance, they could tailor the content and also the assessment. And that really showed us an improvement. And within 4 or 5 months, I can tell you, there was a good shift from what the students were to where they reached. So that is where blended learning really helped us in Dual School. So that's it from my end for now.
Thank you. And Dr. Pramod, over to you.
Yeah, good evening. This is Dr. Pramod Mahajan, heading one of the oldest and biggest school of UAE with around 10,000 students in a single campus. Blended learning. According to me, blended learning is an approach, is a tool to blend the classroom teaching with the online resources. Beyond that, it is blending of the human touch with the technology. According to me, the blended learning, actually it gives the aspects of cooperative learning. A lot of cooperation and a lot of coordination happens among the learners if they use the blended learning mode of teaching learning process. Not only that, for the teachers also, it gives them a different eye to see the students with the eye of a student. The blended learning gives the scope to the teachers not only to convert their teaching into the learning, but making the learning visible. And that aspect of making the learning visible makes the blended learning unique in 360-degree definition. We simply called blended learning is using the technology and some other resources and engaging the students, but it's not. It is beyond that. The blended learning actually answer those questions: what learner wants to learn, where learner wants to learn, with whom learner wants to learn, why learner wants to learn, and more than that, how the learner wants to learn. It's not only gives the pace and speed of a learner to learn, it provides the place also for a learner to learn. Beyond that, it gives a lot of opportunity for a learner to engage in a better way, to participate in a better way. It also provides learner to patience and persistence of learning. So when we started the blended aspect of learning, the biggest change which we observe among the student, that they started thinking. So that thinking of those students change the routine or traditional or even techno-savvy classroom teaching into a thinking classroom. That's the something great, according to me, as far as the blended learning is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great introduction. And Vika, I just wanted to ask you a question, if I may, because as you said, this was something your school had been doing for some time pre-COVID. What do you think are some of the key ingredients for success when trying to implement a whole blended learning approach? And I'll come to one more of you in a moment for that question too.
So I'm going to use that question, Anita, to perhaps also highlight the challenge.
Sure.
And I think if blended learning, when we go back to the time when we started, if you look at the landscape of the school at that time, one had to actually identify what would be the possible challenges that one would face to be able to overcome those to make a success of it. And I think the biggest challenge that we realized was a 20th century teacher. We are, and I'm going to ask, or everyone is educated anyone educated in the 21st century here? Post 2000? There you go. So, when we were educated in the 20th century, that is what we saw as the normal. And our teachers taught us as an average. They didn't know anything about differentiation, personalization, and the blended approach also meant that the teacher who had studied and had been trained in that century, how do you make that shift of mindset? And I think that was the biggest challenge that we faced, because the question that we were constantly asked is, how is this going to benefit? And you needed those who were the early adopters to come in. So one had to have a vision to explain, but a lot of people don't buy into that vision initially. So you need to catch hold of your early adopters, ask them to experiment. And like I said, Bala was one of my earliest adopters, and we were in this journey together. And then when people start to see success in what the early adopters are doing, then you have more and people buy into that vision, and you take that forward. So coming to your question as to what was that one thing, remember, schools are human. They are driven by human beings, and any change effort that we have must be able to address their concerns in that change effort. And what are the likely impact? What are the challenges that they will face? So, teachers have to be upskilled, for example. Just to give you a small example, many of them perhaps may not know how to use those EdTech tools. How do you empower them to do that? So if we are mindful as leaders of a school, how you want to bring that shift in your change and the change management, you have to manage it. So those would be really that key.
Thank you. And I think that's an important point with any change management piece, holding on to the vision, holding on to the why, because there'll be lots of resistance, lots of noise. The narrative sounds very different depending on that individual's experience. As you said, we learned on pen and paper in a very particular way. So that point that you made about hearts and minds and holding firm to the vision and the why, I think is crucial to that. So what have been some of the challenges for yourself, Seema, that you've faced?
For us to start off with was to access of devices. Like, not all the students were able to access the device initially. But when you say now almost every house students either have access to either a tablet or a phone or a laptop. But when we started initially, that was a little challenge, but eventually we were able to overcome that. And also, as Ms. Gulati said, even equipping teachers with the needed skills. Because for teachers, now they all know what is Kahoot or what is Padlet. But when we started off, it was a complete new shift. So we need to continuously monitor and evaluate and see where they need the help and provide them the needed support, so that when they use this app in the classes, the impact is evidently seen. Because you just cannot use things there with students, and when there is no impact or no enhancement of learning, then it's of no use. Then even with parents, because for certain parents, the mindset is students, they don't like their children using the devices for learning. They believe that learning cannot happen using a device. So you need to even get that shift for parents. So that was another challenge.
Okay, thank you. Ben, did you want to add something?
In the context of my school, one of the challenges is basically parental engagement, because many of my parents are actually thinking that we actually send the kids to your school and the teachers should be the ones to fully educate the child. Now, without actually knowing that it should be a shared commitment or a shared partnership. Like when we first introduced the learning content management system in my school, they're actually a bit confused now why we need to assign topics or online learning to their kids inside the home. And when we actually explained to them that the purpose of this one is after getting the assessment per term, then since this one is adaptive learning technology, then we're going to assign topic based on the level of proficiency of your kids, and we need your help, especially for KG1 to grade 3. And they're actually a bit confused why we need to assign those topics to their kids at home. It's something to do with the mindset of the parents as well, because some of the parents are thinking that once we enroll our kids to your school, then you are solely responsible for educating our child, without even knowing that it should be a shared commitment and a shared partnership by educating the kids as well.
Thank you so much. Is there some truth in that, I wonder? We're moving more and more towards the screens and the tablets. That's a reality. It's almost a rhetorical question, I suppose, but what's happening here? Is there something parents should be concerned about, and how do we allay those fears, and how do we make sure the teacher still does firmly have a place as a facilitator of learning in the classroom? Can I?
Yeah, actually, blended learning doesn't mean the use of tablets and technology only. There is a human touch, as Ms. Gulati has very nicely quoted that thing. Shift should happen. Now the question arises, are we learning the technology or we are learning through the technology? If we are learning the technology, if we are learning the mobile, if we are learning the tablet, if we are learning the PC, we are creating the techno addict, isn't it? Learning via technology will educate the students rather than empower the student to be an independent learner. And if they become independent learner, that is blended learning. Blended learning is not using 3344 devices, and the teachers are also, going through that. That is not the blended learning. Blended learning is how that human touch of a teacher is empowering the student to be an independent learner. When I say independent learner, means the child should not depend only on the books or curricula or syllabi, or should not limit it himself or herself within that classroom or in that campus. If the learning is extended beyond the campus, that is called blended learning. Within the classroom, outside the classroom, and before the classroom. No doubt, before the classroom, if they have to explore something, again I'm using the word explore. Are we exploring the technology, or we are becoming techno addict? That's a big question mark. If we explore via technology, using technology, you can, do wonders within the classroom, and then you can apply those concepts outside the classroom in the unknown situation. The ultimate aim of teaching learning process is whatever you have learned, if you are capable to apply that thing in an unknown situation, then that's a main learning. Another aspect of blended learning, if you are using only the gadgets, if you are dumping the classroom by the gadgets only, what about the learning environment? What about the learning culture? Now the question arises, can you develop the learning culture by using the blended learning? Yes, a big yes. We can develop that thing. If you make the student an independent thinker, independent learner, if you design the way the child is thinking, I think you will provide them the environment where learning happens, where every corner of your classroom will become a learning space, where every wall of your classroom will speak about the language of the learning. That is blended learning. Now, question comes, evaluate, assessment. Again, days were gone when we are depending assessment of learning and assessment for learning. Now, this 21st century learners, assessment in learning and assessment as learning is more important. And for that, involvement of a human touch of a teacher as well as the human touch of a student. That is important. So if you have to do the assessment as learning and in learning, the gadgets and the devices become secondary. What's become primary is up to what engaged you are involved in the assessment process of yourself. Up to what extent the learner is interrogating himself or herself where he is, whether every day the competency level is increasing or not. If the competencies are increasing, surely whatever happening is the blended learning. Now, if you see the Indian culture, hundreds of years ago, the blended learning was happening. But that is in a different way. The Guru Shiksh Parampara. Students are going to the master and they were in the forest and they were independently cooking, they are independently finding out the herbs, and they are independently identifying what sort of medicative values are there, and then they are independently find out the color combination, the size of the leaf, the volume of the leaf, the density of the leaf. That is also a blended learning. There, the master plays a role of a device, and the learner plays a role of a learner, and the environment, the nature become the learning resources. That is a different kind of learning. So according to me, we should use the technology. Our school is a techno-savvy school. There is no second thought. But we don't create techno-addict. We teach them how to explore the technology to become independent learner. And I think that is the answer of your question.
If I may
Yes,
add
please,
to that as
please.
well, I think as a school, as school leadership, we shouldn't lose sight of what our goals and objectives are as a school. Whether you are going to implement a technology, whether you are going to do blended learning, whether you are going to do face-to-face learning, it is important to ask the question, if I bring in this type of technology, if I do implement the blended learning model, what am I trying to achieve through it? Is it still in line with what we aim for as a school? We focus very heavily on 21st century skills. So how would this tool that I'm bringing into my class actually take it forward? And that should be the focus as to why and what benefit it would have before we actually implement it. The other thing, and it has been mentioned before, is in order for you to find that balance between the blended learning and the face-to-face learning, how do you know enough is enough? There is the focus of knowing your student. Other panelists continuously spoke about equity. Yeah. So in order for you to make sure that your students, each and every one of them, receives what is due to them, it is important that when you bring in your technologies, you know your student. You should know their interests. You should know their levels of attainment. You should know, how which types of technology would interest them. People were talking about gamification, right? Other formats could be competitions. So there are certain things I think that in order for you, and I don't think there's one formula with regard to finding that balance. But for every school or for every class even, it is different. And this is where the challenge is, because you have to train your teachers, to know these things. Before a teacher can bring in the technology, they must know why they are bringing it in, what the purpose is, how it is in line with what we are doing as a school. And I can go on and on and on.
Thank you. And what I've really heard here is the culture. It's more than a device, isn't it? So we can have 28 devices per classroom. We can have 4 devices per classroom, but it's about how we create that thinking classroom, visibly create that thinking classroom. And as they say, culture eats strategy for breakfast every time. So getting that culture right sounds like it's key from colleagues here. Let's just go back to parental engagement, because I think, I'll speak for myself, I think that's probably one of the bigger challenge areas, based on what you were saying around the 20th century learners that we all are. I've got paper and clipboard here. Isn't that ironic on a blended learning session? But what do we think, how are we really, really bringing our parents on the journey?
Quite. Now, let's just go back just after COVID. Parents were saying, stop, I don't want my child on any device. I don't want them to be using, they need to get back to school. Yeah. And parents were resistant to having the children actually utilize technology. They said, enough is enough. I think many, many schools face that. And one thing that we must make sure is that there is a partnership. We must make sure that students, teachers, as well as parents are on the same bus, moving in the same direction. And one way that we did it was we actually had workshops with our parents in the very same way that we would be using technology in a class, with our students to show them how learning takes place through technology. We brought parents in and, demonstrated, did workshops with them, small groups, big groups, and in that way, we managed to get them on board. Yeah, so that is only one technique of maybe getting parents.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add? Yes, please.
So I think when we deconstructed parental anxiety around the use of technology in classrooms, I think we kind of deconstructed it into two major buckets. One is where children are using devices for leisure, and the second is for learning. And I think the anxiety of parents is because their children at home are using it largely for leisure, and that's what they see. And they do not see the benefit of that technological, the edtech tools, etc., when it's interwoven into the classroom session. So and that's been corroborated by the PISA report more recently. So if you see PISA the 22 report which has come out, it's showing that children who are using technology for learning up to maybe an hour or two, they have done a lot better than those who haven't been using it, or those who've been using it for leisure time activities. So I think it's important for us as educators to really engage with parents to help them discern this difference about how is it technology for pleasure and technology for learning. And I think when parents start to understand, so for example, we have put certain edtech tools, which, in the blended learning space. And we've kind of worked with the parents and students and the vendor to say, okay, what is an optimum usage per week? And we've shared that with parents. So parents are now aware that, okay, for this particular tool, my child needs to be on screen for perhaps an hour in the week. And that brings clarity to all stakeholders then. And exactly like what, Fuad is saying, that we need to have that partnership with parents. Somewhere, if we are not transparent and we don't lay our expectations out, that's where the concern then starts to build with parents.
I would like to add on here.
Yeah.
Continuous communication with the parents, transparency, and what our expectations are. When we do that regularly with parents, then they start looking out in the same perspective as we educators do. So once that goal is achieved, the rest of the journey becomes much better. I won't say less challenging, but much better than what you expect. So for us, it's regular check-in with the parents, surveys with the parents. Are they feeling overwhelmed? So when we get the feedback from them and we implement as per the feedback, there was definitely a positive change.
All right, thank you. And Ben?
And I'm going to agree to all my colleagues because on a personal note, back in 2020, when we first introduced a certain organized learning content management system to all the parents, most of them, or if not almost all of them, are really resistant to change. And that one is really constant. If you are introducing change in the system, then expect that there are parents or members of the community who will oppose to that. So I think I'm going to agree with my colleagues in which you really need to know your clientele. You need to know your students and your parents. And back in that particular year, we floated a survey. Why is it that parents do not want to allow their child to use gadgets or basically to be engaged in a blended learning? And we actually find out that most of the parents as well do not know how to utilize the device. So what we did, we conducted orientation and training, not only to teachers, not only to students, but even to parents. And right now, 2024, parents are really open on the blended learning approach. They are more supportive in terms of all the undertakings and initiative of the school, basically to embrace blended learning in our setup. So I think the key here is the clarity of purpose. If you are clear about your purpose and that particular policy is clearly communicated to your parents, and I believe that they will be supporting all the undertaking of the school leadership.
Thank you. And finally.
Yeah, beyond that, it's not only the parental engagement, but keeping the parents well informed about how your child is transforming from one stage to another stage. And it is not only about taking the sessions and or engaging them how to use the technology and all. Beyond that, according to me, we have spoken with the parents in a different way. See, the biggest hurdle to have the effective parental engagement is parental bossing. I am the gold medalist in mathematics. My child should score 100 out of 100 in mathematics. But that is not possible. So to train them or to have a constructive dialogue with them, to come out of the stage of the parental bossing, that is also a quite helpful aspect. And we had a lot of sessions with them or a lot of communication with them that please come out of that zone where you wanted to show that whatever you cannot do during your schooling, your child should do. So that is also parental engagement. That is one thing. Second thing, no doubt, before the COVID or before that, parents were thinking that keep the mobile and devices away from the school. But nowadays, the school is within those devices, within the mobile. So now parents are happy with that until and unless we show that thing, using this device, see the change which is happening, see the pace and speed of your child, which has been increased, and the understanding level is enhanced. They are started now, instead of reacting, they started responding. Now, again, another question is, what are the basic 4 pillars of the learning? Learning to know. So now for learning to know, if you are training the students and the parents that this device is very, very useful to know the world beyond imagination. Metaverse. If they understand about that, the device is very, very important because they can't understand metaverse without the device or without the mobile or without the apps. So the learning to know for that purpose, then learning to do whatever they have learned, how to do it, what to do it, and when to do it. For that also, this technology is important. Another part where the parental engagement is very, very important, the third pillar of the learning process is learning to live together. Again, there the empathy and the human touch come into the picture. Learning to live together. If a child is using this device, that device, and cannot speak with his friend, what is the use? The person, the student, his sphere of influence should have been increased. Now, whether the Zoom is increasing that sphere of influence or his way of communication is increasing that sphere of influence, that's the question mark. So that way we have to ensure that thing. And then last, learning to do, learning to be, answer those questions which are yet to be asked. Think about those technology which are yet to be invented. That is the real way of blended learning. Find out the solution about those issues which are yet to be raised. If the child thinking about solving those issues, maybe environmental issues, maybe scientific issues, maybe social issues which are yet to be raised, then the real sense of education comes. And in that area, the parental engagement, parental involvement, keeping the parent on the same page is more important. And for that, the school and the school leader and the educator and the teachers has to spend more energy to keep the parents on the same page, not only how to and why to use the technology.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much. We've heard wonderful things, Dr. Pramod, about the thinking classrooms, and I think I'm certainly looking forward to coming to visit you and see that in action. But colleagues, I'd also like to hear from you. How do you think, directly going back to the students, how do you think blended learning has positively impacted student engagement and ultimately impacted progress in learning? I will start with you, Ambika, if that's okay.
So I think, and I'm sure everyone will agree, that student engagement has definitely improved leaps and bounds. There's been a huge acceleration, I feel, on that. Because don't forget that the students that we teach today are digital natives. It comes very naturally to them to be on a device when we struggle with it. In fact, so many times when we had just shifted to online learning during COVID, It's our students who came to our rescue when we struggled with technology. I don't know how many of you faced that. Yeah, we did. Definitely, and they would say, can you switch on that button, go to the left, do this, etc., etc. So they also feel empowered. They feel that they're in control. They feel they're contributing very meaningfully to a class when they're assisting their teacher in this way. Having said that, if you look at some of the edtech tools that schools are using today, it is giving them instant feedback. What Dr. Mahajan spoke about, assessments. Now, when you are administering in the olden days, when students used to do it on notebooks, and then the teacher collected that work, then went through it, marked it, returned it, it was feedback in isolation. Now, if you look at a tool, the teacher can anonymize it, but will tell you trends. 60% of the students of the class have not got this question correct. Now, that's a general, and then that's the way the whole discussion can take forward and learning becomes more engaging, because now a student says, okay, I also marked this question incorrectly, but luckily my name is not there, but I know I need to be paying attention to this, when we're deconstructing that particular concept. So to answer your question, engagement has gone up. I think learning has improved substantially. It's also made them into independent learners. And what Dr. Mahajan talked about, a thinking classroom, 100% with blended learning, self-paced modules, where you're giving them the time and space to work through their own learning. You're providing them with choice, voice, and agency then. And if you're able to do that as an educational institution, I think the students would be more than willing to meet you halfway for their learning journey. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Ben, how about yourself?
Well, student engagement really increased and optimized during the inclusion of blended learning, because the blended learning per se is a combination of digital tools and in-person interaction. And if we're going to combine the two, then we can really optimize achievement and student engagement. Like in terms of the digital tool, most of the digital tools right now are self-paced. That one actually allows the students to learn at their own pace. And at the same time, in terms of the in-person aspect of the blended learning, that one enhances some of the soft skills that they need to thrive, especially on the 21st century. Now, if we are actually allowing them to become independent learners by using digital tools, especially adaptive learning technologies, and after receiving direct feedback, and teachers are doing some intervention and remediation inside the classroom during in-person instruction, then we can actually create a learner that is holistically developed. We are creating 21st century learner that is a combination of all the soft skills and the hard skills that needed for them to thrive in this century.
Thank you. And just on both of your points around that instant feedback and the power that really holds, we know the evidence shows us that feedback is one of the highest impact pieces of tool, if you like, to support that continuous student progress. So whether that comes from a piece of technology or a human, that quality feedback can really, really support that. And the instantaneous nature of that really, I can imagine, helps with accelerated progress. Fuad?
Talking about the feedback, even making sure that whatever technology, whatever blended format you are using is working. So you would need the feedback, from whoever is using it, from the students, from teachers, from parents. And what we have seen over a period of time, some technologies that we used were successful in that it even increased students' performance, it increased students' achievement. Others were not as successful. And therefore, it is important to be able to actually say, this works for us, but this does not. And therefore, like feedback in assessment of our students, we also require the feedback from students and teachers on the success. And we use data, to measure impact, to support whether that type of technology used is successful or not.
Thank you. Seema?
One point I would like to add here is giving them targeted intervention with this. since it's a self-paced learning, students were able to get enough and more support, and independent learners definitely, and also getting connected with real life scenarios. I felt that with blended learning, you can get the students connected to experts who are in that field, and that definitely fosters higher engagement. Automatically, enhancement is also there. So those are the areas which I felt was really useful with blended learning for almost all the students.
Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, as far as the feedback is concerned, and definitely the students are more engaged with the blended learning or with the devices. Let me give you one real-time example. My KG teachers are here. We have near about 2,300 students only in KG. So once fine morning, I was taking a round, and in nearby one class, they were shouting, "Wow, Sharjah Indian School! What happened to this class? Why Sharjah Indian School?" When I entered inside, they were finding out Sharjah Indian School using the Google Earth. Now, KG1 child finding out Sharjah Indian School using a Google Earth more than what is the exploration of the technology, and that is the instant feedback. According to me, in the language of the education, they are taking the academic risk to overcome the academic dilemma. Now, if they started finding out Sharjah Indian School over the Google Earth, they can explore anything and everything, anytime and every time. So that sort of engagement is important. During the COVID, ours was the first school who has done that virtual tour to Allen Zoo. And they were sitting at the home, all the students, 2,200 students sitting at the home, and they are enjoying that virtual tour of the Allen Zoo. And I was surprised, a child whose age was 5.5 years explaining to her mother, this is lion and this is cheetah, and what is the difference between lion and cheetah as far as the speed is concerned. So that is the real magic of the technology, and that is the real feedback of learning. So they are exploring more, they are extending their thought process, and certainly they are engaging themselves. Now the question arises, by using this technology, the attainment and progress. Attainment and progress is happening with respect to the competencies and confidence, not with respect to the marks. So sometimes, and it's my firm belief, the schools are not the factory of the marks. So if they are becoming more competent, if they are becoming more confident to respond, that is, I think, that is the best feedback which we are getting from them.
Thank you so much. So some real richness of experiences for our students, and them going as far and as wide as they want across the globe and beyond, even down to Allen Zoo there, but of course way beyond. Finally, I think as we draw to a close, there's lots of investment, financial investment in whichever approach we may take. So the impact and measuring the impact and that time for evaluation is essential, I would say. How do you ensure it's having the desired impact? And what does continuous evaluation or adjustment look like for you to ensure ongoing success for blended learning? Fuad, I'll start with yourself.
So I'll come back to the continuous evaluation. Also, as a school, you should be risk takers, because we're on the edge of technology. I don't think there has been enough time with the technology that we have to actually come up with a definite answer with regard to success. So with the implementation of blended learning, it is important to make sure that you are constantly improving on. You are building on the technologies, because technology doesn't stop. And this is a challenge for the schools, because as soon as they have trained their teachers to use this type of technology, something else is there. AI, it's scary to some extent. So for me, being aware of the impacts, being aware of having to evaluate, being aware that there will constantly be improvements. That is the way forward with a blended approach to teaching and learning.
Thank you. And Bika, can I go back to you, please? Thank you.
So I think Fuad has pretty much covered that evaluation, any initiative, and I see blended as one form of teaching and learning. You have to evaluate, you have to assess, and to be able to do that accurately, I think we need a different sets of data points to be able to make that informed decision on what is working and what is not. So if personally at school, as a school leader, I'll go back to my stakeholders. So it is about, let's say, a middle schooler who is using a particular EdTech tool. We will have an informal conversation. We will also do a survey perhaps to check on how useful do they find it. Then you kind of triangulate it with what the teachers are saying. You triangulate it with the data usage, how much of that EdTech tool are being used. Then you also look at, so that allows you to take an informed decision on whether it's working. But I caution my faculty to say, we won't just invest for 1 year. You have to do it for a substantial period of time, because for any culture to set in or any expertise to develop will take the students for at least over a year. So don't say, I'll implement this and next year change it. I won't have that. So I think the review cycle happens pretty much instantaneously to collect these data points to inform what is happening. But I think change would happen in my schools after 2 years of implementation, because that's when you really get authentic data and with students and stakeholders actually investing in that technology to see the outcomes and then take a firm decision on, yes, we want to continue, or no, we don't want to continue with it. And even when it is to continue, you work with the provider, because by then, your expectations have increased, or you want improvements in that, and you have to work with them to, really up their game also to provide those, the insights you want from, let's say, just a report that they're generating for you, to give you an example. So it's a constant plan and action and review and evaluate and then go back to the planning stage. That cycle will never stop. Just like we do for any other part of the school, I think technology is the same part.
Thank you. And I think that's an interesting point you made about that continuous engagement with the provider. You don't buy the product off the shelf. We can, what do we need? And constantly asking for that. So it's a really good point. Key stakeholder there. Ben? Yes.
Okay. I think there has to be consistency. And like what my colleague here said, you need to consult a lot of stakeholders in terms of making informed decision. As a school leaders, you need, just like a research, you need to have an appropriate sampling for you to come up with the rightful decision, especially if that particular decision impacting already the school community. Now, the first thing that you need to do is you need to consult the stakeholders, not only the students, and you need to go back to the core. I think the reason why you are operating a school is basically for student achievement. If you think that that particular undertaking does not promote any student achievement or does not promote any learning, then you need to have a second thoughts whether you need to continue conducting that particular paradigm in teaching or not. So it is always teaching for effective learning, and it needs to promote student achievement. Added to the fact that there has to be consistency in terms of evaluating all the programs that you are implementing. There has to be periodic evaluation, there has to be regular assessment, and you need to make sure that you are consistently approaching and talking all other stakeholders that could be, part of the school community for you to make that informed decision.
Thank you so much. Seema, did you want to add?
I think they have covered pretty much all the points over here. But what I would like to just add on, as far as this is concerned, is what works for one school or one class may not work for the other. And what works today, maybe tomorrow we need to bring in a change. So we need to have a consistent approach, as rightly told by him, and keep continuously monitoring and evaluating, so that end of the day, the prime stakeholders over here are our students. So they need to be benefited. So that should be our goal. And keeping all those points in mind, if our students are benefited, then definitely we have hit the bullseye there.
Thank you. Okay, and finally, Dr.
Yeah, I'm very much impressed and with the word used by Ambika ma'am, the informed decision. Yes, there is no doubt. If you have to decide something firmly, the informed decision plays a vital role. Now, as you have asked, regular or continuous evaluation and continuous assessment. Oh, what should be the aim of the continuous assessment and continuous evaluation? To narrowing down the learning gap. But for that, first we have to find out the learning gap. Now, to find out the learning gap, again, the informed decision, taking all the stakeholders on the same page, and then questioning to the teachers why this is not happening. It should happen. But it is not always to, take care of the well-being in sense of whatever the teachers are saying, follow that thing. If you have to take a firm decision, you have to go beyond that also sometimes. Sometimes you have to go beyond the, feedback received from the parents also. Always making them happy is also not possible, and that is not the teaching learning process. That is not the schooling. So to take the informed decision or the firm decision, first of all, we have to find out the learning gap and then find out the ways to narrowing down that learning gap. According to me, making the learning gap zero is just impossible. But yes, narrowing down it up to a large extent, for that, this blended learning is important. Parental engagement is important. CPDs are important. Providing platform to the teachers to assist them, to make them comfortable with the emerging global trend. That is important. Such type of sessions are very much important. Today I have learned a lot. There are so many concepts I have learned. Yes, this way we have to do that thing. So these are the important factors to take the firm decision according to the informed decision, taking the stakeholders on the same page. But the problem is investment, where to invest. Nowadays, it's a myth, and we are investing a lot to make the parents happy by constructing the hi-fi buildings, making the school 5-star school or 7-star school. What about the learning? The investment should happen to raise the bar of excellence, and for raising the bar of excellence, teachers training, helping them, assisting them, provide them the platform in such a manner that they can jump in such a way that even sky is not the limit. Just the beginning. Are we doing that sort of investment? That's a big question mark.
Thank you.
If we are doing that, you are successful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there's been some fantastic answers from colleagues on this panel, but also hopefully raise some more questions and food for thought. That constant questioning of ourselves, I think, is important for us to move forward. So as we conclude, really what I've heard is that we have a great responsibility as educators, as school leaders, to get the balance right between the optimization of that face-to-face and technology, and where does the balance lie with that. And Vicky, you opened up by saying the hearts and mind piece, not forgetting our why and our vision as to why we're investing in X, Y, or Z. Unanimously, we felt that student engagement shot through the roof. We saw so many positive examples of that, from traveling around the world to students being able to learn at their own pace, and giving them that choice, voice, and agency, as you said. We've talked about the impact of feedback and how that helps student progress and hopefully accelerated progress. But as you said, for sure, the need for continuous evaluation, there's no start and stop point of that. And it's okay to say if it's not working. And I think training, and doing that in partnership as a collective is essential, and that triangulation between that. What is the data, quantitative and qualitative, telling us, and how do we respond accordingly? But regardless of all of that, holding on to learning and what we all came into the profession to do to ensure learning opportunities for our students. Thank you.
And the last question to the moderator, because you are raising a lot of questions. So one question for you, how the optimum learning environment can be created by using this blended learning?
Well, that's why I said I think we have answers perhaps, but I think a lot more questions. And it comes through the continuous evaluation. What we might think works for KG1 does not work for grade 12. And being open, I think, to hearing the resistance, that's where I personally get the most nuggets of knowledge from. Where is it not working? Because if we can achieve that and to overcome that, then there's a chance we can get closer to the optimal environment. Okay, we're going to take one question, I think, before we close. Thank you.
Dr. De Cruz, once again, Director of the Presidency Group of Schools in Bangalore. You spoke a lot of positive things about blended learning, but there are 3 challenges that studies has found that comes forth from blended learning. Dr. Pramod spoke about learning gaps, but the first challenge with blended learning is the digital gap. The second challenge that comes is academic dishonesty. And the third challenge that comes is decrease in student-teacher relationships. Which of these 3 do you think needs greater attention and why?
Who would like to add, please? Yes.
Thank you. Very interesting question. I think teacher-student relationships should be one of the important of the 3 points, because it's only through that there can really be progress. However, being involved with a blended approach doesn't mean you are throwing that face-to-face out of the window. And choosing your technology for your blended approach is as important as that face-to-face approach that you have in your blended. It is important for you to find that balance. And that is why, I'll give you an example of our school. Our school has the rotation stations, and in those, let's say there are 4 rotations, one of it would be the use of technology, where a student uses technology on his or her own. Yeah, so he or her, our student is learning through technology on his own. Another station would be that collaboration. So the student is using technology, I'm giving an example, of collaborating with the other students. And then a third option could be where the teacher, station, a third station could be where the teacher is, working with students using the technology. So those are just 3 examples of how technology can be utilized to promote communication, collaboration, and even to promote and ensure that there is that contact between teacher and student.
Thank you. Does anyone
I wanted to add one more thing, sir. See, students-teachers relationship and the digital gap. Again, the same thing. If the digital tools are utilized properly by the teacher for in what way? Working with the students digitally. If they work with the student digitally, certainly this relationship will increase. Let me tell you one example. 2-year schools were closed. All the schools were closed, but schooling was going on. All the prayer rooms were closed, but the prayers are going on. In the same way, we have experienced that the student who are selected during the COVID period for KG1, they could not come to the school. KG2, after the second term, they come, and then they were coming and running towards their class teachers. First time they are seeing the class teacher. How that relationship is developed? Because the teachers are working with them digitally. But if you are only instructing them digitally, then the digital gap will be there. If you are only instructing the students face-to-face, even face-to-face, the learning gap will be there. Now, working with the students, what they want to learn, how they want to learn, where they want to learn, in what way they want to learn, if we take care of all those things, neither the learning gap will be there, nor the digital gap will be there. So again, the ball is in the court of the teachers and at a higher level in the field of education, edu leaders. So in what way you are leading your school to ensure that that digital gap is not there. It is the unique feature of yours. It is the unique characteristics of yours. And if we don't work with them digitally, if we don't support them digitally, and only keep on instructing while using devices, that digital gap will be there. Digital gap certainly is not due to the availability or the non-availability of the digital aspect. That's a myth. That's a common myth. It is whether we are working with the students or not. Whether it is face-to-face, whether it is blending, whether it is hybrid learning, whether it is a flipped classroom. Who says during the flipped classroom we cannot work with the student? We have to work with them. That's the, I think up to some extent, I can answer your question, sir.
Thank you. Yes.
Academic dishonesty. Academic dishonesty. And in an era when we are in the generative AI, where it's only going to become transformational and it's going to only accelerate, I think the responsibility for us as educators is very, very immense in that space. How do we empower our students to understand academic integrity? And the other day I was on in conversation with a professor at MIT, and even he was saying that most of the students now there in college and university are using ChatGPT to do their initial survey or their initial exploration. But then that's what challenges us. When we know that our students can have access to those tools, then the question is, are we being able to generate the kind of open-ended critical thinking questions for our students so that they have to go beyond the ChatGPT or the Copilot or whatever that exists in terms of the generative AI. So I think the challenge is for us as educators. How do we teach our students to be academically honest? And I know, for example, at the IB, they can use ChatGPT, but they have to use it as a reference and a source, just like any other, that they would, get a reference, like we all do literature reviews in our research. So similarly, if we teach our students on what is academic integrity, I'm sure that they will be able to source it and you will be able to reference it accurately. And second, the challenge is for us as educators to really take them to the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy and not give them routine questions, but really the higher order critical thinking questions, which will allow them to think beyond a ChatGPT can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
certainly. One
Okay.
minute more. It is ChatGPT and all. There was a great discussion going on whether the ChatGPT is killing the creativity and the innovativeness of students or not. So there is a big yes for that. But beyond that, now I remember my days when I was in MSc final year and APJ Abdul Kalam was the paper setter for electronics. So he said, no, I wanted open book system. All the PG students keep all the books along with you and answer my questions. The person who is talking to you got 35 marks out of 100 and the university topper. So what about the ChatGPT and all? Nothing. Academic honesty is beyond that. How we are responding to those questions, which are, as Ambika ma'am has very rightly said, which were open-ended reasoning. So that is important. And then who will set that question paper? Ultimately we and only we.
Thank you. So staying one step ahead, I think, staying one step ahead of the digital side of things. Amazing. Well, this is the expertise of this panel. Thank you so much for your time today and for such an interesting discussion. I know we've run a little bit over, but certainly I hope you have found it valuable and worthwhile. Thank you, colleagues.